What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty P here with another episode of Steelers Stretch Under. We're doing this one live. First of all, we want to give a shout out to all the Americans out there, a large part of our subscriber and listener base. Happy 4th of July. Probably a bit of an interesting time for me to go and do a live show in the evening on the 4th of July. But this is how I kind of can celebrate the 4th of July. And a lunch break for me in Australia is really around celebrating the Steelers, because to me, that's one of the most important things that I have in my life, thanks to America, apart from, Australia being a big ally and big partner of America. But definitely thanks to America, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. So massive happy 4th of July to everyone out there. Freedom, liberty, all those good things. Independence should always be celebrated. But look, want to do a live show with you guys. It's been a little while since we've been able to do one. Didn't know when I'd be able to do one coming up in the next few days. So I wanted to take the chance to get a live in there. I know the live chat goes off, and that's all those good things. But for those of you that are listening to the record of this, or listening on this on replay, whether you're watching on your phones, your computer, or tablet, or TV, hope you had a great July 4th celebration, and hope you like the show we've got today. For those that are here in the live chat, can't wait to see your comments. You guys are what make a live show worth it. Look, it's been an interesting time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We haven't heard a great deal of actual official news. We've heard a lot of speculation about Russell Wilson. We've heard a lot of, this is his role versus this is Justin Fields' role. We've heard a lot about Pickens. We've heard a lot about the O-line. So the latest developments obviously being Broderick Jones slotted in on the left, Dan Moore and Fatanu to compete at training camp for that right tackle position. The Steelers' 9-man roster hasn't changed a great deal, but we will have a little look into that as well, and just sort of how things are situated there. Obviously, the whole Najee versus Warren versus whoever else discussion is still going on, because obviously it's going to probably be a dual situation like we saw last year, but perhaps even more so given that both Warren and Najee Harris are both off contract at the end of this season. So one of them's probably two dogs fighting for the one bone, as we like to say. And that's when you've got a guy like a Dacian Edwards out of Georgia in the mix there as an undrafted guy. Also, how do you use Cordell Patterson? How might Calvin Austin and someone like him be used in sort of that sweet running game? Let's get into some of the interesting things. I wanted to welcome the live chat as well, Tom and Adam, straight out of the gate. Adam says, do I think the Steelers will trade for a wide receiver too? That's an interesting question. One that we've talked about on a heap of different shows out there. I think my sort of suspicion, bet, prediction is that perhaps in training camp you see this happen. I don't think they're in for Ayuk. Ayuk's going to be too expensive. If you listen to Ayuk on the Pivot podcast, I was going to bring that up a little bit later in the show. You listen to what he's asking for. He wants the $30 million plus a year. I personally think he's worth over the 25 as the number one wide receiver on a Super Bowl winning team. Do I think he's worth $30 million? Not really. That's just me. I don't think he's Justin Jefferson. I don't think he's that type of caliber player, but he is a really good player. Could the Steelers want to invest that much in wide receiver? I don't think so, nor does it make sense with their quarterback situation, because they're going to have to pay Russ next year. They're probably more likely to pay a proven guy like him than they are to even pay Fields. Interesting, I've seen a comment on about Burks. I kind of think that I still think Ayuk, I said this on one of the shows on the channel, I'm not sure if you saw it, or any other, for those of you that didn't see it, I talked about this with Shannon on the show. I talked about this way back when around should they go get McLaurin? Should they go get Courtland Sutton? Should they go get Ayuk? Well, I still think McLaurin is the guy that makes the most sense. Welcome to the live chat, Fuzzy. I still think McLaurin makes the most sense, particularly if Ayuk goes and joins James Daniel, his Arizona State teammate. But I don't think this stuff's going to happen until deeper into training camp. Equally, if there's no sort of trade situation where someone becomes available because of where Ayuk falls, then I think the scenario is that you see who is cut through the preseason process. Now, that can happen, obviously, that'll happen toward the end of training camp. It might even happen the week before the season starts. People will feel that's running things a bit late, but it is a wide receiver. If they're going to be the right fit, they're going to be the right fit. They can pick up the playbook. You can work them into the rotation for the first few weeks of the season. Anyway, when the offense is finding its feet, and let's face it, they're on the road first 2 weeks. They're going to be running the football up in Denver. They're going to be running the football week 1 as well in Atlanta. So I don't see it as a major issue there. But the Steelers are in a position like they were how they picked Peyton Wilson in the draft, like they were in the position where they even got Frazier at the right position, like they were in getting Fields, like they were in some ways in getting Russ. They can let the chips fall to them. So I think it's go back to and put the final stamp on the question, Adam. I think for me, and it's a fantastic question to ask at this moment in terms of specifically, will they make a trade? I think they will wait till another team makes a move and then they can make a move on top of that. It's kind of like, game, like draw 2 and you add another draw 2 on top of that. Or someone goes all in, you're going all in too. But obviously we don't want the Steelers fully going all in this scenario with a $30 million cap hit. As I said, McLaurin makes sense. The Commanders have like $43 million in cap space right now. Getting rid of McLaurin off their books would save about 15. That would give them the opportunity to then easily do a deal on top of that 43. So that gives them like almost $60 million. Signing Ayuk then in the high 20s, early 30s makes a lot is a lot more palatable, if you like, or acceptable for them, their fan base, their front office. So that's kind of where I see that happening. But I think we've talked a lot in this offseason so far around the Arthur Smith offense, not really requiring a classic number 2 to take as many of the targets. And Pat Freiermuth is probably really a number 2 receiver, not necessarily wide receiver, but receiving option right now. Welcome to the chat, Jer. I'm sure you were there when I was 2 minutes late going live because I know Tom said, "What up, Steeler Nation?" and Jer. Just getting some water in. It's a lot to talk on your own on this one. You get a pause. But yeah, so there's some kind of interesting, I guess, narratives. Particularly, obviously, we talk about the wide receiver there. Linebackers, interesting situation as well. Some people are sort of saying that Atlanta Roberts is like, I saw him on one media article as being the unsung hero of the defense last year. I think that'd be a very fair point to make, although I think a lot of people gave him praise. But linebacker is going to be really interesting, obviously, with Patrick Queen coming in the mix. We didn't get to see a full year of Holcomb. Holcomb's coming back as well. Whether he's ready to go week 1, probably doubtful, probably more like a week 4 to week 6, but let's see. Everything appears on track. You've obviously then got, Roman Wilson in the mix. Then you've obviously got Atlanta Roberts in the mix as well. I'm not that high on Mark Robinson at this point. I think that he'll be lucky to make the practice squad. I think we've tried everything there. I think it says a lot that they went and got guys off the couch last year like Miles Jack and Michael Walker. Michael Walker's actually over at the Commanders. It's disappointing they couldn't bring him back as like the 5th linebacker. But yeah, I think we're done with Mark Robinson at this point, or he is a practice squad guy. I think he's limited. I think the experiment hasn't worked, unfortunately. But that's football. That is what it is. It's pro football. There's always guys coming up and making a difference. We'll actually look at the roster in a little bit. J-Double says, hoping. I mean, this is it, because the Steelers literally could have 4 legit starting linebackers. And if you can rotate them, I mean, the problem is, well, not problem, but I think the challenge will be is the tendency will be from Tomlin and co., like Terrell Austin and some of the other coaches, to play the same 2 guys in that 3-4 a lot of the time. And I get that you need to get your money's worth out of Queen. But I'm hoping that they look a bit more bigger picture and across a 17-game season, which soon is going to be an 18-game season, and a possible playoff scenario, and look at, well, how do we make sure we're rotating these guys and managing the workload for them, particularly through that course of the stretch toward the end of the year. You want everyone to be fit and ready to go and to continue that rotation. And speaking of rotation, that's a really good segue into the outside linebackers. I think, again, last year I was really high on what could Herbig be. Could he be a third guy there to really ease up the pressure on Highsmith and TJ Watt? And we saw him go from strength to strength in the preseason. I expect, and we'll talk a little bit about the preseason in a moment as well, I expect this preseason to be an opportunity for Peyton Wilson to show he's ready, just like Herbig showed he was ready last year in the preseason, particularly in that Bills game where he was just absolutely destructive with Kyle Allen, who now, and actually Josh Allen as well, particularly against Kyle Allen, who now finds himself on the Steelers roster as well. But I think this will be Peyton Wilson's coming out party from that perspective. But my point, I said, we were segueing into the outside linebackers. I'm really, really high on the opportunity that Nick Herbig could have this year, particularly in sub package, if they can work him into the mix, or allow him to pass rush, allow Highsmith or TJ Watt to actually step in to that middle part in a sub package. You're going to see a lot more ability for the Steelers to be exotic, and I think I'm really excited by what that opportunity will bring. But we might go through since we're on those positions. We might have a little look about the roster, and then I'll do that more of the preview stuff that I had actually planned for today's show. So we'll bring this up. I'll make it a bit bigger because it is a bit small. It talks a bit about a couple of positions, so I'm not going to go every position that's here on this list. I think center, I will say this, I'm glad that we're now starting to see Herbig sort of move backward a little bit and it become a Fraser show. Thank God it is going to be a Fraser show. So, at least let's just get into that. Let's just get him working with those reps. Let's get him comfortable with Russ. It's interesting as well, they list him here at officially 6'3", 310. I saw even things in the draft. Oh, he's 6'4", he's just 6'5". I saw him at 6'4". Interesting that he is definitely 6'3". Interesting in terms of 310 pound as well. I saw things 315, 320. Perhaps he puts on a little bit. I don't mind that sort of lighter side as well because of the way that these guys built like an absolute brick. Doesn't really concern me, but it is interesting because you get all those comparisons to Jackson Powers-Johnson. And look, live chat, throw in questions too. I want to monitor this. This is why I do a live show. It's for you guys in the live chat to delve in. Anyone that's joined in the last couple of minutes, again, happy 4th of July. Thank you for tuning in on your 4th of July for those of you in America. Cornerback's another really interesting one. I think they've got a real competition here. I'll give you my starters and in terms of most likelihood guys to make the roster. So definitely Joe Porter Jr., number 1. Dante Jackson, number 2. I think people are a bit out on Dante Jackson, but don't realize he's going to be a really good player for this team. I then think you've probably Cameron Sutton. I think you can say lock him in there as the 3rd guy. 4th guy, I think you can lock in Corey Trice. Now, some people might be higher on Darius Rush, but I think with what Trice showed them in camp last year, plus the injury, but coming back from that and the avatar that he is, I think he's locked in there as the 4th guy. Then it probably is Rush. Then you probably got Beanie Bishop. Then it gets a bit open between probably Ryan Watts and I would say probably Josiah Scott because Josiah Scott's slot ability. I know some people are high on Anthony Everett. I definitely see their Anthony Everett there. He is this 6-year player as a really good practice squad addition that might get called up for a game or two pending injury, but I don't really see him as a threat for the 6 cornerback roster spots. If they choose to have 6, they could choose to have 5, but I think they'll go with the 6. I think Grayland Arnold could be really good on the practice squad as like an Arthur Morlett type. But when you've got a guy like Benny Bishop, they're not going to want to let that guy go through waivers. And I think that Ryan Watts offers them more on special teams as well. Adam says, I hope Trice and Rush. Totally. I mean, if those two guys can make jumps while you're letting Ryan Watts develop as well. And Ryan Watts is probably a safety in the future at some point as well. Shannon and I have talked about that. It's what I said the day he was drafted because people were like, this guy's a crap cornerback. I'm like, no, he's going to be a safety special teamer. But I think, you're right. If we get those 2 guys with the speed of Dante and the physicality and speed of Joey Porter Jr., I mean, this team's going to be really well set up, particularly to face, a lot of people go, oh, how's this team going to go score points? And I'm the first one to say it. You've got to be able to score 30 points to win in the AFC. And I think the cool thing is that with you can get 4 of these big body guys, you're going to be able to take on the likes of a KC or a Buffalo Bills. Speed-wise, there could be challenges on a Miami. But most teams or New York, you could take on. If you've got physical big guys, you're going to be able to take on those West Coast deep offenses. So I really like this idea of building these guys. And plus, they're cheap. They're super cheap. That's the other thing, which is great for the cap, considering we are going to have to pay a quarterback at some point. And Tom says, TD says, once Cam comes back. Well, this is it, right? Cam Sutton fitting the mix too. Doesn't allow you to have to go put, Beanie Bishop over his skis or one of those other guys over their skis. So that's the exciting thing about bringing Cameron Sutton back. Let's just see, though, because he could be suspended for another other games. I can't support the off-field stuff if any of that's true. We've got to see how that plays out. But, all things being equal, he probably is the 3rd lock on that list, as I was talking about from cornerback perspective. Then you get into the defensive line and defensive ends. I put a video yesterday on Logan Lee. Go check that out. Interesting, they've listed him as DT rather than DE or DL. He's definitely not a DE. I think he's more of a DL with Benton rather than DT, but these are designations on the website. Tomlin's always said that depth charts on the website and team lists on the website are not always accurate. So, let's, we'll stick with that. We'll see how that goes. Jer, I will bring up your comment in just a sec. I'll just finish D lineman. But obviously, Benton's a lock there. Cameron Hayward's a lock there. They paid for Montrevis to come back. You expect he's a lock there. Loudermilk, big question mark. Liao, big question mark. Lowry is a great addition. I think some people don't understand or necessarily acknowledge how good he's going to be. He's going to be better than Wormley, all things being equal, or more impactful. Jonathan Marshall there I see is a really good player in terms for the practice squad to step up if he had to. Then you got Ogunjobi, who is basically uncuttable because of his dead cap hit. I've heard some cool things about Wellington, Pavilion out of Rutgers, but we'll have to see. And then Jacob Slade's been in the mix a little bit as well through training camp. But again, these are some of the first names you'd expect to go. I think the headline piece for the D line and DEs is really DeMarvin Liao and Loudermilk. I think Liao's more versatile, so you probably might want to keep him on a practice squad, but I think you'd want out if he gets cut. But Loudermilk, they probably know a bit more of, and they could see him slotting in a little bit more if there's another major injury. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. But Loudermilk, this is his last year in the on the rookie contract, so that comes into play as well. Go to Jazz question. Yeah, that's it. Only 8.5 wins. I can't see this team having less wins than what they had last year. This is going to be a much better team. And touch wood, but you can't. Hopefully, the injury curse isn't so terrible at every single position, or not that there was it was last year, like where you see 4 linebackers go out. I agree, Adam. I think he's going to have an absolutely huge season. I think he's going to have to, because I think they're going to have to manage Cam Hayward snaps a bit, particularly if they do plan on doing any re-sign. And we've heard different things. One week it's he's going to be re-signed. The other week it's I haven't talked to the Steelers. We'll have to see. But I think he needs to have a big year. And if he doesn't, even if he has what he had last year, I'm still hopeful. But if he doesn't have a big year, the Steelers are going to have to probably use a high draft pick next year on a D lineman to get cheaper at the position, because they're going to have to spend, whether it's on Hayward or someone else, because you're not keeping Ogunjobi next year once you get rid of the cap hit this year. Cam Hayward will be getting older, and they don't really have anyone that can step up. So I'm really hopeful that Benton can allow the Steelers to use that first or second round picks next year on different other positions of need, because we as Steel fans, we really, really need Benton to have a breakout year for sure. Hit the nail on the absolute head there. And then we got a fullback. I think we all know, Connor Hayward's kind of locked there. But you're hearing some good things about Jack Coletto. So I'm interested to see what sort of camp and preseason he has, because fullback can be an interesting role or H-back in the Arthur Smith offense from what we've seen in previous stints. The guard position, as I go through, I think we pretty much know it's Isaac Siamalu and James Daniels. Mason McCormick's your backup there. I still think Nate Herbig. I think they're drumming up Nate Herbig's recognition as being able to play center. I've talked about him being cuttable because of his salary cap. I think, the Steelers could even try and trade the bloke. That might sound crazy, but you could trade him. And if you could trade him and Dan Moore and like a fourth for Terry McLaurin, well, I mean, I'm taking that tomorrow. Some people can correct me in the live chat if you wouldn't, but I'd taken that tomorrow for sure. Jay said, we can't really be any worse than Cap. Exactly. Completely different team and feel. We've got mature guys in the mix. We've solved the problems. We've gotten better through the draft. We've got more depth. This looks like one of the best teams we've had in a long time, certainly since probably almost 2017. Sean says, if we're forced to play under center, Ken Wilson. Mate, I know. When they got him, there's that photo on Mike Tomlin's birthday with Patrick Queen. I took this video and I sent it to Mark. I said I was going to put from Steel Nation Australia for those of you, just to clarify. And I said to him, I'm thinking about putting this out in a short, because on a YouTube real short, because this is insane how short he is. Broderick Jones has made a joke about that, but the bloke's proven, man. He's done it in the NFL. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether he goes more back behind the line than even Kyler Murray does. So we'll have to see when we get into the season. Then I think, obviously, we talked about center, we talked about the guards, we talked about the linebackers, we talked about the tackles technically. You got Spencer Anderson out there. I think he's a really good right guard. Possible depth at tackle if you really needed it, but we haven't seen enough about him, spiking the football out there. So we'll have to see what that's like to see if he can play center. But yeah, Furtado is apparently showing out and showing up, which is awesome. Dan Moore is going to be, he's the big question mark on this team. If he doesn't fit and he's not a starter, do you move him? Do you really want to go through an Okorafor situation like last year? It's hard to say because it's great to have someone of his experience as your third tackle. So yeah, it could be interesting. Well, Jed Evil, knowing your Marquis jokes, wouldn't it be a pizza? I don't know. I still can't figure that one out. I went back and listened to that show. I can't figure it out. TD says, I would take Terry for that, but the O-line depth. Well, this is the problem. Exactly it, right? And the thing that's the big X factor is Dylan Cook. You hear a lot about Dylan Cook. I haven't seen anything on the field that I super love from Dylan Cook, but that doesn't mean he's a bad player. I mean, the Steelers keep him around. But to have that with McLaurin, like you're either going all in or you're not. So yeah, nice. I like that take, Tom. Sean says, seems he's shocking a lot more than Arthur Smith. True. But also, I think Russell Wilson, I think that the happy medium here will be the play action. I think that's where we'll see a happy medium. And also, remember that, like, I think some people, whilst Frazier is great and was the most pro-ready specialist center in the draft, there might be things he is more comfortable with doing early on as well. And so that might have an impact too. I don't think you'll see anything too exotic from this offense early on. In the pass game, I think in the run game you will. I don't think you will in the pass game. I think that's how I'm feeling about it. Welcome, Pittsburgh Toddy. Hope you're having a great 4th of July. Awesome stuff to see, mate. We talked about the quarterbacks as well. We talked about the running backs. Safety, it's probably the one area we haven't really talked about. I'm super high on Deshaun Elliott. I can't stress it enough. As a Texas Longhorns fan, I think this guy's great. I think he does great things. He's an old school safety. His attitude is fantastic. You only need to go back to some of his post training videos throughout minicamp, OTAs, etc. But particularly his entrance press conference. The guy is an absolute champion. We obviously know Mink is a champion. I think Kazi could be more of a cuttable guy than what some people are saying, particularly with what my co-host Shannon from Steelers Global Perspective said, which was that he's got a reputation on being fined. So if he does something, a flagrant foul, he does something that's professional foul, a problem, he's probably looking at an even bigger suspension than the 4 games last year. So that's something to be aware of with Kazi. Also, he's expensive. He's not a strong safety. So he could be more of a threat depending on how the other DBs perform, particularly because of Sutton and a guy like a Ryan Watts. So that'll be interesting. I feel like we talked a bit about wide receiver too earlier. There's a lot of talk about wide receivers. The only thing I'll finish with is I think Van Jefferson is a much better route runner than people think. I think that's going to be good with his weight at 200 in the Arthur Smith offense. And I also think Roman Wilson is going to be a terrific player for this team. And I can't wait to see what that looks like in 2024, because I think Roman Wilson through the preseason is going to be a big deal. J-Devil says, hey, Dottie, and then Pittsburgh Toddy says, forget the fight. Well, this is it. Don't do a JPP, right? Yeah, don't do a JPP. All right, so what's coming up? Obviously, we've got Steelers training camp coming up the end of July. Pretty much I think it's the 24th off the top of my head, which is really cool because that's actually the day the college football game comes out of Madden. That's the day Deadpool comes out in the movies. That is a great time, as if you're me, all the things that you like all happening. But the first game we're going to have of the preseason is Houston on the 9th of August. So that's coming up. That's a lot faster than you think it is. That's a month away. It's not a month away effectively from football wise. So 5 and a bit weeks away. It's so exciting. I cannot wait. Then I love that, man. That's a good one. Yeah. I like that. He's a good 4th or 5th guy. Better than some of the 5th guys I've had on the roster in the last few years. Then really going to do Buffalo again. They're playing both of them at home at Acrisure. I actually think this is a really big thing that's not really talked about. I know it is preseason, but this is going to be really good for the Steelers because I think this is going to allow a lot of the younger guys to get acclimated really well, particularly considering they're going to be playing their first two regular season games away from home just to get that comfortability earlier. And then because you're coming home in week 3, if you're coming home in week 3 down and you're 0-2 to start the season after 2 away games, or you're 1-1, that Chargers game is going to be a difficult game. It's going to be a great game, but it's going to be a difficult game. And you want those guys to be acclimated and take advantage of playing at home. So I like that there's 2 games straight up at Acrisure in Pittsburgh to kick off the preseason. But I think what you see in week 1 versus week 2 are going to be vastly different. Obviously, same thing for these guys. These are 2 AFC contenders with set quarterbacks, with set top players, particularly wide receivers. The way that these 2 teams shape up versus what they're going to look like in season is going to be markedly different. But they're good tests as well, because the depth of these squads is hopefully going to be a bit better than some other squads out there. And then the same thing to have to face Detroit at home. That's really good, stiff competition. These are 3 teams that are all set to make to go on playoff runs within their conferences. So this is actually a really good thing for the Steelers. I think in some years, they've played some average opposition in the preseason. I know they're not full teams, but I do think that comes into play. And I also like the idea of they're getting the experience of traveling away down at Detroit. But at the same time, it's not like they're traveling across the country. And I think that's a big deal as well for the Steelers. And I know that they try and avoid doing too much of that in the preseason anyway. All right. Now, one of the polls, we've got a poll going on the community tab right now, which I don't think it's closed yet. Go vote there after the show. We've asked you what sort of content you want over this quieter period. Right now, I think it's 50%. The last time I checked it, had said they wanted us to do more content on the channel previewing the opponents this season, and it's one of the things I really wanted to talk about most. So we'll do that. We will do that over the next few weeks. We'll look at. We'll make sure that whether it's with Shannon on Steelers Global Perspective stream of content, or whether it's my content, we'll start doing a lot of previews for these, and we'll go team by team and give an insight into players they've brought in, how they're looking, how they're shaping up, all those good things as well. Obviously, we'll do those in the weeks prior to those games too, but really as we go through the next 6 weeks, looking at some of these opponents, I'll try and work through everyone. Obviously, the Steelers can play their AFC opponents twice, so we'll be able to just cover them off once each. But I will do that. But I did want to just go through generally just some things I'm thinking about as we sit at the 4th, 5th of July, depending on where you are in the world, things I'm thinking about when I look at the season schedule and some of the narratives and the challenges and things for Steelers to think about. But yeah, Jed was like, I'll do whatever I can and give you the content I can with the time. Toddy asked me a great question here. What will it take to win one more Megills? Yeah. So the Steelers lost some close games against some crappy teams. That's about executing. That's about getting Pat Freiermuth into the mix. Pat Freiermuth was not in the mix in the Matt Canada offense. And you saw as soon as the way punt Matt Canada out of the team, he goes on and has a 100-yard plus game over at over against the Cincinnati Bengals. And so from my perspective, that's a big deal. How do you work Pat Freiermuth in? Because Pat Freiermuth could be the answer to winning a game or two in a key place. It's the linebackers. Having 4 starting quality linebackers is going to be crucial. Having they lent on Benson last year on the defensive line. We talked about that. Him having the ability to take that second-year leap, as Adam brought up. It's the same thing on the cornerback side of things. It's having depth with 3 or 4 guys. I mean, starting 3 guys, Dante Jackson is incredibly quick out of LSU, actually, and a lot of people don't put this together, but remember, he played with Patrick Queen, so there could be some familiarity there. But having a guy like that, having Joe Porter, and then Cameron Sutton's your 3rd guy, with avatars as your 4th, 5th, and 6th guys, and a guy that hits hard like a Beanie Bishop, a faster Mike Hilton version. That depth at cornerback was not there last season. And so I know I talked about a couple of defensive positions there, but then when we think about a Pat Freiermuth, we think about a offensive coordinator that can properly script plays and actually looks at making downfield plays and stretch the field, not just, it's 3rd down, it's 3rd and 7. We're going to throw it 2 yards and try and make a play. That's stupid. So I think, Toddy, hopefully I've answered the question, but I think consistent, a better starting quality defense, even accounting for some injuries. I think a much more fluid offense that leverages key playmakers. The Steelers will be better year two. Their running game will be better year two, not just because of the O-line, but because Najee and Warren will be more used to how they're both being dually used through games, which will help them tremendously mid and late season. But yeah, the fluid offense will be huge. And if the O-line can be any better than they were last year and prove that they're a top 20 O-line, best case a top 16, top 12 O-line, this team will go really fast. So like I think, if you get, I've probably talked about 6 different factors there, or at least 5 different factors. If you get all of those coming off, I think you're winning 2 or 3 games more, not just one. But it's a fantastic question, Toddy. And I think that's kind of the lens between now and the start of the season to look through it is what will it take to win 1 or 2 more games? Because those 1 or 2, if you win enough of them in that last part of the season stretch, you can win the AFC North. You win the AFC North, you're playing at home. And then that changes everything. Jay says Russ throwing more touchdowns than in Kenny's career. TD says top passes grabbed by players in Atlanta last year was running back. Yep, tight end, running back. Exactly. Yep, 100%. That's a bit harsh, Portner. It's a little harsh, but I can understand it. So going through how we're going, I think I've talked a bit about the opening part of the season. I'm just keen for week 3. Bring on week 3. I will be there. I'm thrilled for week 3. I cannot wait. That is going to be amazing. I love that. Then week 4 is going to be interesting when they go and play Indianapolis Colts. It's a really big season for Anthony Richardson over at the Colts. They've got a good team that's gotten better. I like that it's indoors. I think that's helpful for the Steelers. You want more indoor games toward the end of the season. So that kind of sucks that is where it is. Dallas Cowboys at home. I can't imagine how big that game's going to be. I can after going to the Chargers game. I'll be able to imagine what that'll be like. But that's going to be epic. By week 5, we'll know whether either of these teams are starting to really develop, whether the Cowboys have sorted out their issues. They've got a lot of challenges on offense, a lot of questions. The CeeDee Lamb's like, I want a new contract. This could be Dak's last season there. They bring back Elliott. They let Pollard go. Like, their offense could be really, really good, or it could be average. The defense should be pretty decent. But yeah, this could be it's hard to say. Dallas always sound like they got a lot of promise, and then they don't live up to it. A little bit like sometimes like the Steelers, but I think there's a lot more flash and a lot more hype and a lot more attitude from Dallas, and then they don't put on the field. And then the Steelers go away week 6 to Las Vegas, and in Las Vegas, they went out there and they played last year week 3 that game. They know what that formula looks like to go and get the win there. Again, I think in stadium helps. They've got a great defense. They're really developing a very underrated defense. They also obviously lost Josh Jacobs, but they've now got 2 tight ends in Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. So they're going to be a very interesting matchup. And the Steelers' safeties and defensive backs will need to be performing well. And this is where your avatars like your Corey Trices and your Darius Rushes and your Ryan Watts and your Deshaun Elliott's are going to be really important in stopping this Las Vegas team. But I think the X factor in this one's going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he's going to have a top game. He's going to pick apart that defense, and it's going to be beautiful. Then you got the New York Jets game. And what I'm thinking about this right now, you've got the 2 weeks at home there before the bye in Acrisure. I think they then will know about Aaron Rodgers and where that's sitting. The Steelers' defense is going to have to be ready because they'll hit you from all different sides. I think Breece Hall, their running back, is one of the best running backs in the NFL. And this is why I like that the Steelers are going to actually be playing some pretty run-heavy teams if you look at it. That's the theme that I wanted to bring up as well. Atlanta will run the football with Algier and Bijan Robinson. The Denver Broncos with Javonte Williams. I think Gordon went back there as well. They've got a couple of other running backs. The Chargers obviously moved on Eckler, but they've got J.K. Dobbins. Their deep offense is run by the Ravens guys. They've got Gus Edwards, I think, as well, is out there. Is Gus Edwards or Justice Hill? They've got one of the other Ravens guys as well. So they'll be looking to make a big deal there. And then Indianapolis Colts, obviously, with Anthony Richardson, obviously Jonathan Taylor. They got a couple of other guys as well backing up there. And then you go into Elliott with the Cowboys. There's definitely a lot of run heavy before we hit the Jets, and that's important because then you go the Jets, obviously, with Breece Hall, as I mentioned. They've got a couple of other guys there too. And then because I don't know whether Dalvin's still with them. I don't think he re-signed for this one. And then you go into New York, and you just kind of got to get to the New York game and get to the bye, and hopefully you're at that point 6-2, 5-3. Anything basically better than 4-4 would be really, really great. But we need to make sure the Steelers' run game is working for themselves to soak up the football, but run defense up until that point will be really key. Come back from the bye, you go up against Washington, away at Washington, but at least you're not traveling too far. I think this one's going to be a really interesting test for the Steelers, just in that who knows what Washington could be. They could be absolutely underdone by them, absolutely falling apart. But they've got some really good players, and they've got a good defensive line. They've got some good cornerbacks. They've acquired well for a team. They've got proven guys. Yes, on offense with their quarterback, they could be suspect. Only from the perspective of he'll still be developing, not that Jaden Daniels is going to be a bad quarterback. So this game could be anything. This is one of the I call this like a wild card game in the regular season. It could be anything. Yeah, it is. I thought it was Gus Edwards that they had with Dobbins. Yeah, and their offensive coordinator they've got from the Ravens as well. There we go. Mr. White said it. Steelers left 2-3 scrummaging on field last year, mostly because the OC was inept and the QB. Exactly. That's exactly what we said, because the fluidity on the offense and not being able to execute. It really is. Oof. That's interesting. That might not be Russ. That might not be Russ's fault, but we'll see. Obviously, then you get into this stretch, right? You have that X Factor game. Hopefully, you can win that one. Hopefully, then you're 7-2, 6-3, because then it gets then we've got the gauntlet, right? My big thing about this is that you've got to win at home. If you're not going to win at home in these matchups, you're going to struggle to make the playoffs. You're struggle to be better than third in the AFC North, because the playing away is going to be really hard. Playing away at Cleveland on a Thursday night on a short turnaround is going to be a real challenge. It's always hard to play these days in Paycor Stadium. Again, though, could depend on where the Bengals are at with their injuries. But then you really do need to win these at home. Philadelphia will be a very interesting game for this team, because it's slotted between obviously a lot of AFC North games, and you can't throw games. There's not enough games in the NFL to throw games. Plus, as Steelers fans, we never want the Steelers to throw a game. So the real challenge here in finding a fine line between overexerting in one game and setting yourself up poorly for the next game. And this is where having 4 starting linebackers, this is where having a diverse defensive line, this is where having a number of different DBs that can play, this is where having a proper strong safety is critical, and having rotation outside linebacker as well is crucial. This is what I said to start out the show. That versatility, if the Steelers can build that and continue that and get used to that and be consistent with that versatility and that depth, they're going to get through this stretch really, really well. Because let's face it, these games are going to come down to defense. 100% going to come down to defense. They're not going to be 30-point shootouts, in Cleveland in week 12 and week 14 of the season. It's not going to be the case in week 16. But then you get to week 17, and the Kansas City at home, Marky D, Steeler Nation Australia is going up one. That's going to be rocking. Can't wait for that. That's going to be an awesome game. And that could be anything. And then you close out the season with the Cincinnati Bengals. So if we're tying a big bow on everything I've talked about in the show, and hit me with any last questions before we finish up, it's this, as I said, it's versatility, it's depth. That's what the Steelers have got to foster, with a bit of youth sprinkled on top with some really key proven experience. Those are the trends that we've talked about throughout the whole offseason. We've seen some of that start to happen at OTAs and minicamp. We have to see that continue to develop at training camp and through the preseason. And if they can do that, they will set themselves up right for this season. But this is one of those seasons where, we don't want this really any season, slow starts. But if they don't have a fast start this season, and that's not going to be based on points on the scoreboard or, a certain number of touchdowns or yards allowed in defense. It's going to be a bit more about how confident they are, how they react within a game and the way the game goes. You can't forecast a game. You can't read into the future. But, remember a few years back, we had the 11-0 start. Steelers had the 11-0 start, and it felt a little bit false. I don't mind if they lose a game when they look really in it and they look like they're building something. That doesn't bother me. I hate the losing, but it doesn't bother me if I see light at the end of the tunnel. What bothers me is we sometimes see wins that give you no confidence, and that doesn't help you down the stretch at all. Like last year, or was it before when it was last year when Kansas had a slow start to the season. They're on the screen in front of you right now. A slow start to the season, and they were figuring out the rhythm of their offense. They came through and they win the championship. That's the thing. It doesn't always start perfectly on the scoreboard or on the win-loss record. That's obviously I want the Steelers to get as many wins to start the season early. But what I want to see is that this team's philosophy, its confidence, its consistency, its approach, all those things are getting better and evolving as the season goes on. They're not getting worse. And our injuries obviously play a part. But I think I think there's been a lot of excuses made in terms of Matt Canada and on the injury side. It's now to get down to business. There's no more wasted seasons of TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and Minka Fitzpatrick, or even wasted seasons of Tomlin. I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't Tomlin fans, but it's wasting Tomlin as a head coach as well. So interested to see what happens and in terms of how the Steelers can evolve and continue to become it's almost like their maturity as a winning football team. Portner says we might be we might be, but at least they're trying, right? They got the top free agent in Trubisky. Turned out not to be a good idea, but at least they tried. Kenny Pickett was the best quarterback in that draft class. At least they tried, right? They've done the same thing now. They got the best guy that was available that was absolutely cheap. It's an absolute steal. And they got the best guy that was available that was on a rookie contract that had the highest ceiling if you can get his accuracy and he's seeing the field right, which might not be possible. But at least they tried. They didn't give up much to get him. So I do agree with you that we could be in QB purgatory, but at least the Steelers are trying. You can't ask more than what they've done other than sell the farm in a draft or trade a bunch of good players and hopefully a quarterback's going to win you 10 games a year, that doesn't work either. It didn't work with the Jets with Aaron Rodgers last year, hasn't worked with Herbert so far with the Chargers, which is why they're changing tact. Apart from Mahomes, who still has some great weapons, he can't score a 60. He can't throw the football to himself. So I get the sentiment, and it could be there, but I'm also really I'm satisfied that the Steelers are doing everything they can to make sure that it's not a long purgatory. Toddy says I'll take Russ and Justin over Lenny. Exactly. I 100% on that one, Toddy. I'm 100% with you. But look, with that, it is getting late for you guys on the East Coast. It is wrapping up my lunch break. I really enjoy doing this live show with you guys today. For those that join me in the live chat, thank you. The comments are like what makes this goes. It's always, I love this. I wish we could do more live schedule. Kind of doesn't permit that, unfortunately. But look, really, really excited about the season ahead. If you're listening to the recording of this, thank you for tuning in as well. If you are not a sub of the channel, hit that sub button, hit that like button. If you are a sub, I'm going to continue to do some more polls on the community tab, which only subscribers can vote on. Continue to vote on that as well. And yeah, I think what we've got to finish up with, as always, go Steelers. And Jet Evil, thank you very much for the comment. I love the upper echelon, mate. Thank you for tuning in. Catch you later, 46ers.